start from the business problem and then work towards how you. It starts from the structure or overall architecture itself. Where do you want to store the data? How do you want to store it? What is it that you want to parse? Everything has a cost associated with it. The key thing to keep in mind is, doing an hourly reporting, let's say, cost X dollars. Doing real time would probably cost 10x or 20x, right? And those objectives should always be business objectives and not technical
Right.
objectives, right? So you cannot have 5 owners for revenue data set. You cannot have five owners for customer data set, right?
Okay.
You have one person.
Hey guys, welcome to Better Engineering Management Podcast. And today we have with us Mr. Prateek Singh, who is a very good friend of mine. Prateek is an expert in data engineering, and he has been in the industry for the last 2 decades, where he has been an expert in data engineering as well as data analytics, and he leads engineering and management. Prateek, please welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Pradeep, thanks for having me on the show. Hi, everyone. I'm Prateek. I'm a senior manager with a strong background in data engineering, and I help analytics and machine learning team as well as business with their needs. I kind of work very closely with the business leaders to help them drive data driven decision making. And I lead a team of exceptional engineers and managers who make all of this possible. In addition to engineering, I've recently done my MBA, which kind of helps me understand business strategy much more in detail, gives me a new perspective. And yeah, thanks for having me on the show. Thank you.
Thank you, Prateek. So, Prateek, one of the things that has changed recently, particularly in the last decade, is the amount of data that is, generated by various systems, apps, and devices, right?
Yes.
Earlier, it used to be in terabytes, then it became petabytes. I don't know. Right now, it's maybe in, much more data than that, right? And it is only going to increase. My questions was like, how do you deal with this much amount of data? Because a lot of this data is structured and a lot of this data is also semi-structured, right? Which is there is some pattern, but it may not have complete patterns, and it's difficult to kind of query or kind of store such kind of data in a structured way, right? So if you have to deal with such kind of data, which is both structured and semi-structured, particularly semi-structured, what's your approach to that, and how do you deal with this?
So, in recent times, yes, especially with the explosion of big data, definitely the data volume has increased considerably. In fact, in a order of magnitude, there are different strategies at the end of the day to handle with both structured and unstructured data. Right? But at the end of the day, the key thing you have to keep in mind is you have to start with the business question. What is it that they are asking? And then move towards what from the engineering systems, be it sensors, be it real time, or be it batch processing, or it could be applications that are giving you these data sets. You have to keep in mind, start from the business problem and then work towards how you want to ingest that data, what you want to ingest, and then what you want to parse out. Now, if you were to think about it traditionally, right, you have any, if you take any big company, they will have ERP systems, which is very structured in nature, right? And they report on your let's say your revenue information. It's quite easy to do that, your orders, your backlogs, which region
Almost
is doing.
structured data, basically.
Yes. And that is the bread and butter, right, for any decision support system, just to understand how, just to get the pulse of the business. Now, with the advent of all sensors and everything else, over a period of time, what has happened is this semi-structured data has also allowed us to do a kind of a loosely coupled with the source system, or I would call it semi-structured. So, such as JSON, for example, a very good example. It allows you to ingest the data. It's a key value pair. You can figure out what you want to ingest or what you really want to convert into structured format for you, to answer your questions, and maybe keep the rest in a data lake, right? So it's not just about the data. It starts from the structure or overall architecture itself. Where do you want to
Okay.
store the data? How do you want to store it? What is it that you want to parse? Everything has a
Okay.
cost associated with it, so you have to keep that in mind. And then how you are serving it to the end users, right? Is it a dashboard? Is it a Excel sheet? Is it a data science team, right? Depending on the use case, the more you work with, for example, machine learning and data science teams, they would want as raw data as possible with some feature engineering built in. But if you're working with analysts, they would want more structured data. If you are working with execs, they would want keynote or presentations or self-serve dashboards, right? So depending on that, you would go and change your strategy. But at the end of the day, you have to ingest the data. Yeah, there are various technologies available. The more if you go more towards real time, you have Kafka and so on and so forth. You go towards where do you want to store it? You have Iceberg, S3. All these. How do you form your data lake? Then you have traditional data warehouses, data marts, or data lake house. But at the end of the day, you have a place to store the data. You'd want to not process everything or bring it to a structured format for your query needs. And eventually, your serving layer at the end of the day, either a visualization or a data scientist, and so on and so forth. Which access do you want to give? So there's a whole data governance then around it. But yeah, that
Sure.
at a very high level, without getting into too much technical details.
Sure. So basically, what I understand is there are a couple of things to keep in mind. One is the cost itself. There is a
Yes.
cost associated with storing. So the data that you are going to use, which you have real-time immediate use case for, and you want kind of query a lot, you better store it in a more structured manner. Rest of the data can be put it into some kind of a file storage or data lake kind of storage where, which is not something, which is not going to be accessed very or processed very soon. So you can that data can wait for some time, and you can kind of store it in a comparatively cheaper pricing mechanisms. And then third thing that will be driving this is basically who is this data going to be served and in what format would they expect this data to be. That will decide how we will process the data and what kind of processing will be involved, basically.
And the technology has evolved a lot, right? It is
Right,
still evolving, right? So I have definitely a different set of views, but let's start from I want real-time reporting. Everybody thinks it's the most coolest thing out there. We want real-time
right,
reporting. The key thing to keep in mind is, doing an hourly reporting, let's say, cost X dollars. Doing real time would probably cost 10x or 20x, right?
right, right.
Just for that last one. So
Hmm.
you have to start with the business problem. Even if I am giving you real time reporting, are you taking any action on it? Right.
Okay,
Now, there are systems such as fraud detection and applications like that definitely need real time reporting. You have something, let's say,
alerts
in
basically.
match that is going on very recently on the, and you want to show some stats, right?
Right.
Geo always shows that, okay, I have these many crore people watching and whatnot, right?
Hmm.
There is a slight business value in that
Right,
you
right,
are showcasing that I have these many impressions in real time,
right.
and you can get more ads and whatnot, right? But more often than not, the business reporting usually you are not changing your business decision based on what is happening in the now, right? You have your long-term strategy, and then you are trying to, and then you, but of course, have some tactical decision making. So starting with the business problem, then you work backwards, and then you see, okay, there are many databases like even Snowflake, for example, allows you to query JSON directly, right? So you don't even have to change it, right? You can just directly read it from the Kafka queue, send it to the UI layer or wherever you're kind of sharing it. So there are many tools, but the key thing I would go back is any system is designed to support certain things,
Solve the
right?
business problem.
Objectives, right? And those objectives should always be business objectives and not technical
Right.
objectives, right?
Okay.
And then you work your way backwards to make sure that the system is secure, customer data is private, it's
Right.
scalable, and so on and so forth, right? And then you build it accordingly within those parameters.
Yeah. So, Pratik, related to that, only my second question was there that, as you mentioned, right, there are reports which are going to be generated and sent to customers many a times. And one of the problems that we have actually faced is what has happened is since the data is stored into multiple data sources, right? Like there is a real-time databases like Mongo and MySQL, Postgres, and then there are data warehouses. And then with these days, we also store the data into indexes, right? Like Elasticsearch for, speedy querying and all. So what happens oftentimes is like when the reports are generated and sent to customers, right? And there is some kind of, since the report is generated over multiple data sources, customers often see and say varying data into the reports, right? The count which is present in this report is different, whereas the count which is present in this report is different, right? And sometimes they create problems in this, particularly in the B2B segment, where they can question, right, why the reports are different, because they are not going to understand all the technical implementation and complexity of that, right? So How do you suggest that the company should tackle these kind of problems, which is related to the data sync?
That's the bane of anyone's existence because it loses your customer loses trust in you, right? It's
Correct.
whether it's B2B or B2C doesn't really matter, right? Or you're just sending a report to your execs, and doesn't really
Right.
necessarily need to happen if even if the data is going from one source. It could even happen from multiple different storage solution. It could also happen that you have a base layer from where the data scientist is pulling the data, and then you have a bunch of filters, and then you're creating
Right.
an aggregate from where you're serving it up in a report, right? And the counts are different. Uh, there is no easy solution to it. There is definitely a technical aspect of it, and then there is a process aspect of it, right? One is starting with the technical aspect, right? It's quite easy. At the end of the day, nobody really cares if you cut the moment you're out of engineering realm, and when
Mm.
you're at the end of the day with the business, right? They don't really care uh, about MongoDB or Elasticsearch and five other technologies that you name there, right?
Right.
They care about the data that they have and whether they can trust it or not, right? So you can the technical way to handle that is making sure that you have proper data governance in place, right?
Okay.
You have proper data quality checks in place, and these all should be automated at this point. In
Right.
2025, all of these should be automated. Having
Mm.
said that, you cannot check each and everything, right?
Right.
Otherwise the automation itself will take whatever that job itself will take a lot of time, right? So you identify key metrics and you keep on adding to it, right? Depending on what metric is being focused on or what column is being targeted, but you need to have data quality checks. You
Mm.
need to build simple things which makes it easily understandable, like again, still focusing on the technical side. You need to have a proper data catalog. You need to make sure that your stakeholders or your downstream system understand what is it that they are querying, right? It could be as simple as you have a report. Let's say you have a dashboard. It just says the data is as of this certain time, right? So it was
Okay.
pulled as of, let's say, quarter one or quarter two,
Okay.
whereas
Okay.
a data scientist might have access to latest data, right, or older data set,
Sure.
right? So that everybody knows, all your
Mm.
stakeholders know where they are pulling the data, what time frame they are pulling the data. So you need to have continuous discussions about the actual rules that are implemented. And this was a big problem actually in one of my previous role, right? So what we came up with was this was slightly, I wouldn't call it architecture change, but we came up with one single source of definition, especially if you work in big organization. What is a
Mm.
revenue number, right? That
Mm.
itself can have 10 different definitions of how people are looking at it, right? So you
Right.
come up with one single definition, more of a semantic layer, an enterprise semantic layer, which helps you have the single source of truth. And now
Okay.
slowly kind of moving towards the process part of it, which is you need a champion for that source. You need to have
Okay.
only one owner or one person who is responsible, or one team which is responsible for one number, right? So you
Okay.
cannot
Okay.
have five owners for revenue data set. You cannot have five
Okay.
owners for customer data set, right? You
Okay.
have one person. Now, if the sales team wants revenue, or manufacturing team wants revenue information or customer information, or
Mm.
customer teams or vice versa, right? They need to
Mm.
work with their SMEs to make sure that they are pulling the right data set
Mm.
and have the right asset that they are querying or the construct that they are using to come up with a
Mm.
number which aligns with them. So that has to be a very cross-functional effort, and there needs to be a
Mm.
process around it, right?
Okay.
uh, Everybody thinks that it's the moment you have access to a table, it's very easy to go and query and build out your own, but the rules
Right.
change, especially the more complicated it gets, right? How you are actually deciding what should go in your, for example, what is a booking? It is a very
Okay.
simple question, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
when do you recognize that revenue, right?
Okay.
Things like that. Every other group will have a different viewpoint on it, right?
Okay. Okay.
uh, on when they actually want to do certain things, right? So, for
Mm-hmm.
example, the salesperson, let's say in the B2B business, the salesperson might actually want to say, okay, yeah, the moment I've sold it, it's done from my side.
Okay.
But the
Correct.
services team might say, okay, I have to finish it, and that's when I'm done, right?
Okay. And the finance
So,
team may say once you realize the profit, then only it's done.
yes, yes. So all those things, there needs to be very clear, transparent discussion around
Okay.
what is it that we are using, and
Mm-hmm.
more often than not, it's the process part which breaks first, then the technical
Okay.
part. right?
Okay,
Because
understood.
technical is easy. You're dealing with machines, you're dealing with numbers. You go and put in
Mm-hmm.
your checks. You can do it in house. It's a process part where you need to ensure that yes, all your stakeholders are aware. You know
Okay,
that who is the owner, where do you have to
okay,
go, get the data set,
mm-hmm.
get the access, and make sure
Okay,
you get their blessings before
okay,
you're using it.
sure. So basically, what I understood is there are two things here. Basically, one is communication. Instead of kind of customers trying to, kind of when they see the reports from multiple places and kind of start matching those reports, if those reports themselves tell that this report has been generated based on the data which was like, which is 12 hours old, whereas this report has consumed the data which is like real time, then they will automatically know that this like we should not be comparing these two reports and the numbers which are present in these reports.
Exactly.
So either communicated directly, or you can have a lot of engagement with the customers where educate them more and more that the data sources
Yeah.
maybe same or different, but there can be lag because of how recent the data is, and that is mentioned in the reports itself. So please don't get confused. That's one
Yeah.
thing. And other thing is what I understood is even though the data is stored in tables in a certain structure, doesn't mean that that is how it has to be read. There has to be
Correct.
a kind of a definition of the data. Like when you say a booking, right? What booking means for different people, and they
Yes.
may have different interpretations of it. So if one team or one person is guiding that whole he's kind of owner of that data, that he can decide, okay, this data means what, and everyone should kind of try to follow the same definition of that data, and that can also kind of reduce the amount of confusion that happens. Correct me
Yeah.
if I'm wrong anywhere.
No, no, no. That's perfect. Like going back to the example, right? Like I remember,
Mm.
vaguely remember one of the startup that you worked for, right, where it was more about the transportation business, right? So let's say you have a
Right, right,
report which you are sending to the customer that every hour these many bookings are coming from you, right?
right,
And then you have a end of the day report, right, which is
right,
the
right,
business is closed, and one is an hourly report which is giving more real time snapshot, and then you have an
right.
end of the day report. Now if somebody doesn't know and they are taking the end of the hour report and they just keep on adding that up and say, hey, my final number is not matching with my end of the day report, what's happening here? It could be as simple as that, customer cancelled order, they're negative,
Correct,
and then they get consolidated,
correct.
or like with you order something on Flipkart, Amazon, right? Simple
Mm.
things like that, and those need to be explained that okay, maybe at the end of the day
Right.
there is a we have a process, just making it up as I go along now, but we have
Mm.
a process which consolidates all the order from five different customers, from the same
Mm.
customer, five different orders, we consolidate into one order with five different line items, right,
Right, right, right,
to optimize the delivery process, something like
right.
that. So instead of now you're seeing five number, you're now seeing one number.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the order number customer change something. Maybe it was done over phone or whatnot, right? And that gets fed into
Mm-hmm.
the system. Happens
Sure.
next day, right? So things will always change. Knowing the business
Mm.
process and making sure your
Mm.
consumer of that data understands
Right.
how and the rules behind it
Mm.
is
Will help.
usually the best way to deal with it.
So as I understand, as you mentioned, going back to that, instead of here the technical things, the process is more important. And when you say process, it also means communication, right? All the way from the technical implementation till when the customer receives the report, there has to be strong communication between, so the customers understand this is how the report has come, this is what the data means, and this terminology should be same across everybody. Okay, so Pratik, so coming back to the same, the next question that I wanted to ask is, since you were discussing structured and semi-structured data, right? And how much out of the box support exists today? Let's say if you want to run a machine learning algorithm on data, or let's say you want to do predictive analysis on data. Out of the box support, I mean that you don't have to write code, you don't have to write any scripts. Maybe the tools or the data warehouses where you are storing the data. How much support exists there to kind of, do predictive analysis and run machine learning algorithms on the data to derive various insights?
Actually, it's been there for quite some time. As I was mentioning, for example, Snowflake natively supports JSON, right?
Hmm.
There are companies out there which will allow you to just drag and drop and create a pipelines, right?
Right.
And you can
Mm.
run five different models.
Okay.
The tools, shouldn't say company, tools offered by these
Mm.
companies. There are many
Right.
out there.
Mm.
I don't want to name one in particular, but they will just allow you to drag and drop things and then
Hmm.
run with it. It will allow you to, without even writing a single piece of code, just by building DAGs, on a UI, you
Okay.
can say, okay, this is the variable that I'm trying to predict, and you can run
Hmm.
five different algorithms, 10 different algorithms at the same time. So compute is no
Hmm.
longer a bottleneck.
Okay.
And if nothing else work, you can always go and ask ChatGPT, and it will give you a
Mm.
code.
Sure.
But what matters is, it's see, the code is there, and the
Mm.
way I see it is, it's these are more of an accelerators, right? They are not going to replace the machine learning engineer, the
Mm.
data scientist, right? Because you need to have the intuition behind what is important, what business
Okay.
problem you're trying to solve, right? So
Right.
yes, it will give you a lot of things out of the box, such as you want to write a simple JSON parser routine, right? You
Mm.
no longer have to go to Stack Overflow, search it, right?
Right.
Whatnot, right? You can or build your own algorithm to do that, right? It's
Mm.
pretty
Mm.
straightforward nowadays. So
Okay.
that definitely accelerates the development for the basic thing, but at the same time you still need to, which allows you to have time to actually think about the business problem, structure your data in a way where you can get to the actual uh, output or the outcome that you're looking for.
Sure.
And yeah, that's the way I see it, and it will
So,
continue to
can
get better.
you, yeah, I mean, in your own experience, are there any tools or technologies that you recommend or any methods to derive better insights out of the data?
There are many tools out there, but tools are just tools, right? You need to have
Mm-hmm.
that business intuition,
Acumen, basically.
analytics,
Okay.
and acumen, both for analytics and look,
Mm-hmm.
having the skill to look at it from five different ways, right? Through five
Okay.
different
Okay.
lenses, right? Tools have changed, right? So you can do the same thing with R, C, C++, all the way now to in Microsoft Excel, all the way now
Okay.
to,
Okay.
advanced AI analytics tool. I think it depends again on the question and how you are thinking of five different business problems that you're trying to solve, especially in the data world, right? What
Sure.
story that you're trying to tell.
Okay. And in coming up with the latest trends like AI, what role do you see AI playing in this data analytics going forward?
Oh, like I said,
Mm.
same accelerator, right?
Okay.
We are just at the beginning of many of these things, right? It has
Mm-hmm.
already
Mm-hmm.
accelerated a bunch of things for the engineers, right? When it comes
Mm-hmm.
to writing code, same thing I see happening in the AI world as well, especially now the new models are much better with the data processing or understanding the data. The earlier ones were not so good with the simple mathematical things. Think of it as a person, right? Let's say you have a transport analyst in the previous
Mm-hmm.
example that we were talking about,
Mm-hmm.
right? You can ask a question and then you can just reason with it, right? And
Right.
you can have agents who are just going and looking at five different angles, looking through
Mm-hmm.
five different angles. It's still your thought process, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe at some point we'll have a much better AI which can even, ask us, hey, have you looked at this? Have your brain map kind of put it out there.
Okay.
There are some tools that I've seen that does that, not at the level where we would imagine, but it would require
Okay.
a lot of engineering to build that.
There's a beginning point. Okay.
Yes, yes, yes. Where you can just say, let's say a simple business question, right? Why my
Okay.
revenue is low this month, right? And now you want to
Okay.
look at,
Okay.
is it because of weather impacting? Is there a strike? We didn't have enough trucks, we didn't have enough drivers, we didn't have X, Y, Z. Maybe we need to look
Mm.
at this. Maybe this is a seasonal change.
Okay.
Now, in the old days, you would go and write all of this, right? But with AI,
Right. Right.
especially with the agents, right, you can just ask, okay, maybe look at this data, maybe correlate
Okay.
it with this data. Do you see any relationship? Do you see any anomaly? Do you see maybe our system was down, so we could take the bookings? Maybe we had a holiday, right? So
This
I think
itself
that
sounds like a huge leap, actually.
yeah, yeah, it's happening in some sense already,
Mm-hmm.
right? We are already
Okay.
making chipping at it.
Okay.
It's much better now. It's much
Mm.
faster now.
Okay.
So I think things are only going to improve from here. But you have to be
Pratik
careful
Mela.
about
Sure.
all the information that is flowing your way.
Yeah, that's also true. We had to be kind of aware about compliance because AI, we don't know what kind of data it is fetching from all these models, right? And kind of maybe all the rules and regulations also whether it is following or not, we don't know. So probably there has to be more alertness, for the lack of better
Yes,
word.
yes, yes. So actually, so yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not talked about it, but the governance, the compliance, the privacy, the security,
Mm.
encryption address, things, all of that is the ground stakes now. It has to be there. You cannot do
Right.
anything without that, right? Any data. It's not only a competitive edge that your company
Mm.
has, but it's also your responsibility, especially if it has uh, PII information in this today's agent
Mm.
world, right?
Right. Right.
And in some cases, it's also legal obligation that you need to save it,
Okay.
store it, process it in a manner which resonates.
So I think integrating AI is kind of big challenge in data world at least because there are a lot of compliances. If your data has a lot of compliances and all those things,
It
which is
is
not publicly.
challenging. but you can always
Mm-hmm.
host your own model internally,
Okay.
things like that.
Okay.
It is challenging. Yes, it is not
Mm-hmm.
as easy as just, put your
Okay.
revenue data on ChatGPT and then start asking it a bunch of questions. I would not recommend that. But yes,
Okay. Okay.
it takes a different approach, but it is much better
Okay.
than where we were, let's say, 5, 6, 7 years ago.
But my last question is like for the people who are kind of who wants to go into data engineering, right, into the higher roles in data engineering and take more responsibilities in that area. What are some of the things that they should start learning and kind of what are the trends that they should start kind of thinking about? And if you can guide some of them, like these are some of the steps or approaches that you should start thinking about to become a better data engineering as well as all the data related things like whether it's analytics, whether it's sync, if they want to think in those directions.
See, data engineering at the end of the day has become, it's almost like a software engineering, right? So you need to be very good at, your usual algorithms, data structures, things like that, right?
Okay, okay,
So again, that's bare bones. You need to know that.
okay, okay,
Uh, I would say focus on fundamentals, right? Focus
okay,
on, it's a vast field depending on which side do you want to go, right? Focus on fundamentals because the technology will change, right?
right.
When I started, we were using Oracle 8i, 9i, and whatnot.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now we have Snowflake, BigQuery, and so on and so forth, right? Every in between there was Teradata, there were Hadoop,
Mm-hmm.
Cassandra. There are like five other databases. Now there are five
Right,
databases for every use case that you have, right?
right.
But focus on fundamentals. Understand really how data is stored, what is the
Okay,
cost associated with it, how it is retrieved, what happens behind
okay,
the scenes, right,
right.
down to the disk level. That kind of helps you how indexes work, right, at a very high level, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sounds good. Yes, it is indexing the data, but what is
Mm-hmm.
really happening behind the scene?
Okay.
Understanding data modeling, right? How do you
Mm-hmm.
really want to structure your data, not just for today's requirement but also for future requirements, right?
Mm-hmm.
Will it scale? Think about that, right? Especially in today's world, the data volume
Right.
grows exponentially, right?
Mm-hmm.
Will you have to rewrite your code, or can it handle 10x 100x volume?
Okay.
Things like that would definitely help. And then
Okay.
working on problem, right? Data is very easily available these days, right?
Mm.
Open data
Right.
sets. Take a
Right.
problem. Don't just go and do Kaggle and things like that, right? Take a
Mm-hmm.
problem, find a
Okay.
real solution to that, right? I think
Okay.
that will have a more impact.
The hands-on
And at
basically.
least, yeah, hands-on. But
Okay.
Kaggle is also kind of hands-on, right? You get a
Mm.
data set and then you come up with the usual sentiment analysis and all of that, right?
Right.
It's good, but 100
Solved
other
problem
people
now.
can do that.
Scientifically, mm, probably
Yeah.
after AI has come, right? Those are called like solved problems. Maybe not be that interesting anymore.
Yeah. It does not need to be like, you don't have to go and build the next LLM, but you have to go and
Mm.
figure out, again, look at it, what problem you're trying to solve, right?
Right.
Solve the real world problem, right? Maybe it's a traffic problem in Bangalore, right?
Mm.
Why it is happening, what is happening. Maybe
Okay.
for not at city level scale, maybe at a sector scale or something like that. What are
That's
the
very
reasons?
interesting.
How we can reroute the traffic, right? And
Okay.
all
Okay.
of that takes a lot of data set, which is
Thinking.
publicly available nowadays.
Okay.
So
And
yeah,
one more
engineering
side,
definitely is there.
yeah, one more side question I had is like a lot of this technology like Hadoop and all, right? Since we have things like Snowflake and those things, right? Does it really is there any interest that people should take in learning technologies like Hadoop, which are more into processing and storing? Because now we already have storage solutions, ready-made storage solutions, right? Would you recommend people to kind of
Oh
learn those
yes.
technologies also?
I think yes. I think, like I said, do not go after one specific technology that, okay, I need to be
Mm,
a Hadoop master. Okay, you need to learn one technology at least, right?
mm,
But instead of working top down, work bottoms up. Understand
okay,
what really is distributed computing, right?
okay,
How does
okay,
distributed storage works, right? Once you kind of understand that, it is very easy to take your learnings and then learn any technology quickly, right?
okay. So it
That's
will
the
help if people kind of put an eye on those technologies also, kind of refresh once, like how Hadoop used to work, because even though the technology may be getting used behind the curtains, but the fundamentals were there, right? So, okay, that's what you were trying to say, I believe.
yeah. And there's new technology every nowadays. Now and then.
Right.
Yeah, now there is
Okay.
S3. Storage is
Yeah.
cheap. And everyone can easily play with it, right? It's all easily
Right.
available on AWS. Doesn't
Mm-hmm.
cost a lot. Right? You can quickly get
Okay.
it up and running. Unlike when we
Right.
started, right?
Right.
Just to get an Oracle instance was a pain on your
Right.
laptop. Scott Tiger. I don't know what other databases were there.
Right, 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 sure.
So nowadays
Okay,
things are very easily available. People are easily available
right.
to help you, guide you.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of content out there. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
you need to know the languages. That's given. You need to know.
I think there is also a kind of a thing happening here, like DevOps and data engineering team are kind of the roles, the boundary between those roles is also thinning a bit, right? Because all the capacity planning regarding, let's say, databases and all, which earlier used to be done by DevOps people, now I think it all will also come into the plate of data engineering. So do you think that this line is also kind of becoming more and more thinner between
But
DevOps and data engineers? Of course, DevOps people do a lot of other things also, but
yeah, a good
when it comes
engineer
to
can do both of them.
okay, okay,
So it doesn't really matter whether you're a data engineer, DevOps engineer, software engineer, right? Depending on where your interest takes you. But
okay,
yeah, I think DevOps has its own place, right? A
hmm,
system can get really complicated really fast, right? And you need
right,
to know things.
right,
That definitely requires a different set of skills, right?
hmm,
Managing all of that. And they have to work with their users who are data engineers in this case, right?
right,
And again,
right,
this goes back to somebody has to forecast how much servers they need and then work with DevOps
right,
team to make sure that server capacity and whatnot is there.
sure,
So yeah, and they will have to work in hand. I don't think the boundary is completely blurring, but a good engineer can will work all the way into
okay,
it. Yeah,
sure. It's a fun one's interest actually.
yeah.
Sure. Okay, Pratik, thanks for your time. It was really great discussion, great insights, and hope people who want to come into the fields of data engineering and kind of go ahead will learn a lot from this. And if I have any more questions, I'll ping them to you so that you can answer them later. Thanks for your time and have a good day.
Okay. No, thank you. Thanks for having me. Hopefully it was helpful.
Sure,
Thanks.
very
Bye.
interesting, Pratik. Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Okay. Bye.
Have a nice day.